They call these foods anti-aging, green tea, dark chocolate, staples in every Live Longer list. I believed it too. I bought them from the biggest stores in America, brewed them every morning, treated them like a quiet promise to my future self. But then I started noticing something strange. The benefits sounded timeless, yet the warnings were recent. Between 2019 and 2023, consumer testing groups and federal agencies kept releasing reports most people never read. Heavy metals, label gaps, exposure limits quietly exceeded, so I did what any careful consumer would do. I slowed down. I compared labels. I dug into test results. Months of reading, cross-checking, and asking one uncomfortable question. If these products are really about longevity, why do they keep showing up in safety investigations? Number 1. Lipton Green Tea. This is one of the most recognizable green tea brands in the United States. You'll find it at Walmart, Target, Costco, Amazon, millions of boxes sold every year. The promise is simple. Green tea equals longevity. Antioxidants, EGCG, cellular protection. The same story you've heard before, but here's what pushed me to look closer. Tea leaves don't just absorb sunlight and rain, they absorb what's in the soil. That includes heavy metals like lead. Independent consumer testing in the U.S. has repeatedly shown measurable levels of lead in multiple green tea products, especially mass market brands. The issue isn't one cup, it's repetition. Drink it daily for years, and exposure adds up. On top of that, many tea bags are made with plastic-based fibers that release microplastics when steeped in hot water. There's no bold warning on the box. No clear batch-by-batch testing results printed where consumers can see them. Nothing illegal, technically, but there's a silence where transparency should be. Long-term lead exposure is associated with neurological stress, kidney strain, and increased baseline inflammation. That's not longevity. That's a slow compromise. My conclusion wasn't dramatic. I didn't quit green tea. I stopped trusting this version of it. The solution is simple but intentional. Loose leaf tea, brands that publish third-party test results, and rotation. Longevity should never come from drinking uncertainty every single morning. Number 2. Lindt Excellence Dark Chocolate, 70% and 85%. Dark chocolate has been rebranded as health food. Flavanols for blood flow, cognitive support, even heart protection. Lindt sits right at the center of that narrative in the U.S., marketed as premium, refined, and better for you. But cocoa has a problem most labels don't talk about. It naturally accumulates heavy metals, especially lead and cadmium, from soil and processing. Consumer testing reports in recent years found that regular consumption of some dark chocolate bars could push daily lead exposure beyond recommended limits, particularly if eaten every day. Again, this isn't about fear, it's about frequency. A square once in a while is different from a nightly ritual. Long-term exposure to lead and cadmium has been linked to blood pressure changes, kidney stress, and neurological effects. Lindt isn't breaking the law, but the brand also doesn't clearly communicate testing data or exposure context to consumers who believe they're making a clean choice. That gap matters. My takeaway was uncomfortable but clear. Dark doesn't automatically mean clean, and a food marketed for brain health shouldn't quietly burden the nervous system. The fix isn't deprivation, it's restraint and discernment. Reduce frequency. Avoid daily habits built on incomplete information. Choose brands that disclose metal testing, or rotate your antioxidant sources altogether. Awareness, not indulgence, is what actually protects you over time. Number 3. Great value turmeric powder. Turmeric is often described as a golden shield against aging. Curcumin, its active compound, is linked to reduced inflammation, better brain signaling, and cellular balance. In theory, it fits perfectly into the longevity narrative. In practice, the brand matters more than most people realize. Great value turmeric is sold nationwide through Walmart, one of the largest food distributors in the United States. It's affordable, widely available, and trusted by default because it sits on a familiar shelf. That's exactly why I stopped and looked closer. Turmeric has a documented history of adulteration. To enhance color and visual potency, some suppliers have used lead chromate, a compound that contains lead. Between 2017 and 2022, U.S. regulators issued multiple import alerts and safety notices related to turmeric contaminated with lead. In some tested samples, lead levels exceeded safety thresholds by several 100%. Lead doesn't just pass through the body, it accumulates. Long-term exposure is associated with cognitive decline, anemia, hypertension, and liver stress. What makes this troubling is the context. Turmeric isn't consumed occasionally. Many people take it daily, sometimes in capsules, sometimes in smoothies, sometimes in golden milk routines meant to reduce inflammation. That turns a small contamination risk into a chronic exposure pattern. There's no clear disclosure on mass market spice labels about batch testing or third-party verification. Nothing that reassures a consumer using it every day. My conclusion was direct. An anti-inflammatory ingredient that quietly introduces a neurotoxin defeats its own purpose. The solution isn't abandoning turmeric, it's choosing certified organic sources, brands that publish certificates of analysis, and avoiding long-term daily use without verified testing. Healing should never rely on blind trust. Number 4. Bertolli Extra Virgin Olive Oil. Olive oil is often called liquid longevity. Rich in polyphenols, associated with lower cardiovascular risk, and deeply tied to Mediterranean longevity studies, Bertolli is one of the most recognizable olive oil brands in American supermarkets, positioned as authentic, traditional, and extra virgin. But extra virgin isn't just a style, it's a measurable standard. Acidity levels, oxidation markers, and polyphenol content all matter. Over the past decade, independent investigations and regulatory reviews in Europe and the U.S. have shown that a significant percentage of mass-market imported olive oils fail to meet true extra virgin standards by the time they reach consumers. Long transport times, blending practices, and light exposure degrade the very compounds responsible for olive oil's health benefits. In some cases, oils labeled extra virgin tested closer to refined oils in antioxidant content. This isn't about toxicity. It's about misalignment. If the polyphenols are gone, the promised anti-inflammatory and anti-aging effects are dramatically reduced. The consumer thinks they're drizzling protection onto their food, when in reality, they're getting little more than calories and fat. There have also been legal disputes and regulatory scrutiny around labeling accuracy in the olive oil industry, highlighting how difficult it is for consumers to verify quality from a label alone. Chronic inflammation doesn't come from olive oil itself. It comes from believing you're supporting cellular health when the product no longer delivers on that promise. My conclusion wasn't that olive oil is overrated, it's that this version of it often is. The solution is specificity, single origin oils, harvest dates within the last 12 to 18 months, dark glass bottles, and storage away from heat and light. Longevity doesn't come from tradition alone. It comes from chemistry, freshness, and honesty. Number 5. Yoplait Original Yogurt. Yogurt is often sold as the foundation of gut health, probiotics, digestion, immunity, balance. In the original longevity narrative, fermented foods are framed as a biological reset button, something that quietly rebuilds you from the inside out. Yoplait Original sits right in the center of that promise in the U.S. It's been on shelves for decades, trusted by families, stocked everywhere from Walmart to Kroger. But when I stopped looking at the front of the label and started reading the numbers on the back, the story changed. A single serving of Yoplait Original can contain 12 to 15 grams of added sugar, depending on the flavor. That's roughly 3 to 4 teaspoons in something marketed as gut-friendly. Over time, high added sugar intake is linked to increased insulin resistance, systemic inflammation, and disruption of the gut microbiome itself. In other words, the very thing this product claims to support. Most consumers never eat just one serving either. The small cup feels harmless, even virtuous, so it becomes a daily habit. Multiply that sugar load by 365 days a year, and the metabolic impact is no longer subtle. There is also the issue of probiotic transparency. Labels often don't specify strain types, viable counts at expiration, or whether the cultures meaningfully survive digestion. Nothing illegal, nothing dramatic. Just a gap between perception and physiology. My conclusion wasn't that yogurt is bad. It's that this version trains people to confuse sweetness with health. If gut health is about reducing inflammation and restoring balance, then a product that quietly feeds dysregulation works against the goal. The solution is boring but effective. Plain, unsweetened yogurt, minimal ingredients, and no added sugar. Real gut health doesn't need to taste like dessert. Number 6. GT's Kombucha. Kombucha has become a symbol of modern fermentation, alive, ancient, functional. GT's is one of the most recognizable kombucha brands in America, often positioned as raw, authentic, and transformative. And to be fair, kombucha can support microbial diversity when done right. But here's what often gets lost in the wellness glow. Kombucha is still a fermented sugar beverage. Many bottles contain 12 to 16 grams of sugar per serving, sometimes more depending on the flavor and fermentation stage. Drink one every day, and you're introducing a steady sugar load into a routine meant to calm inflammation. There's also the alcohol issue. Fermentation naturally produces ethanol, In the early 2010s, several kombucha brands, including major players, faced regulatory scrutiny when alcohol levels exceeded 0.5%, the legal limit for non-alcoholic beverages. Even when within compliance, sensitive individuals, children, and pregnant women can be affected by repeated low-level exposure. The label rarely communicates that risk clearly. Kombucha isn't harmful by default, but it's not neutral either. Regular consumption can contribute to digestive discomfort, blood sugar swings, and liver stress in susceptible individuals. The problem isn't fermentation, it's frequency and framing. Kombucha is marketed as something you can drink every day without consequence, like water with benefits. That's misleading. My conclusion was simple. Fermented doesn't mean unlimited. The solution is moderation and context. Treat kombucha as an occasional functional beverage, not a daily cornerstone of health. Read sugar content. Respect fermentation. Longevity isn't built on excess, even when it's bottled in glass and labeled raw. Number 7. Starkist Chunk Light Tuna, Canned Tuna, U.S. Starkist is everywhere in America. Walmart, Target, Costco, Kroger. It's marketed as clean, lean protein and an easy, healthy habit. But tuna is a large predatory fish, and that's where the quiet risk starts. Mercury accumulates. FDA EPA data puts canned light tuna around 0.12 ppm mercury on average, while albacore runs 0.32 ppm, nearly 3 air eggs higher. Lower doesn't mean free. It just means the math changes when you eat it 2-4 times a week after week. That's why federal guidance repeatedly tells high-risk groups, especially pregnancy and kids, to limit tuna. Mercury doesn't disappear overnight. It builds. There's also the can itself. For years, many canned foods used BPA-based linings. Some brands now claim BPA-free, but consumers still rarely see clear, batch-level transparency about packaging chemistry. My conclusion: Starkist isn't automatically unsafe, but it's not a longevity staple when it becomes a frequent routine. The fix is simple. Treat canned tuna like a rotation protein, not a daily default. Keep it closer to once a week. Vary seafood, and follow FDA EPA advice instead of the healthy halo. Number 8. Non-organic blueberries sold at scale in the U.S. Blueberries are often called the brain's reset button. Rich in anthocyanins, linked to slower cognitive decline, improved blood flow, and better memory. The science supporting blueberries is real, but again, the product matters. In the United States, blueberries are one of the most heavily consumed berries, and also one of the crops most vulnerable to pesticide use due to pest pressure and large-scale farming. Non-organic blueberries can carry measurable pesticide residues, especially when sourced from high-volume supply chains designed for year-round availability. Regulatory agencies establish maximum residue limits, but those limits are based on individual exposures, not cumulative daily intake. If someone eats a cup of blueberries every morning, 365 days a year, the exposure math changes. Chronic low-level pesticide intake has been linked in research to endocrine disruption, neurological stress, and increased inflammatory signaling, particularly in vulnerable populations. There's no warning label for that pattern, just a clean image and a healthy reputation. The problem isn't blueberries. It's the assumption that more is always better, regardless of source. My conclusion landed quietly but firmly. A food that supports brain health shouldn't quietly undermine hormonal balance over time. The solution is intentional sourcing, USDA organic when possible, seasonal rotation, and variety. Longevity doesn't come from one superfood eaten endlessly. It comes from balance, diversity, and attention to what accumulates when no one is looking. Number 9. Packaged broccoli sprouts sold ready to eat. Broccoli sprouts are often described as detox powerhouses. Sulforaphane, NRF2 activation, cellular defense. In the original longevity narrative, they're framed as tiny plants with outsized impact, capable of flipping on the body's internal repair systems. And biologically, that's true. Broccoli sprouts can contain up to 50 to 100 times more sulforaphane than mature broccoli, but the risk isn't in the molecule, it's in the format. In the United States, packaged broccoli sprouts are sold pre-washed, pre-cut, and ready to eat, often kept in cold cases at grocery stores. Sprouts are one of the highest risk foods for bacterial contamination. Between 1996 and 2022, the FDA and CDC linked multiple outbreaks of E. coli and Salmonella directly to raw sprouts, resulting in hundreds of hospitalizations. The reason is structural. Sprouts grow in warm, moist conditions that are ideal not only for plants, but for bacteria. Washing does not reliably remove pathogens once they're present. That's why federal agencies have repeatedly warned high-risk groups, pregnant women, older adults, immunocompromised individuals, to avoid raw sprouts altogether. When a food marketed as detox sends people to emergency rooms with acute gastrointestinal infections, something is deeply misaligned. Acute infections don't just cause short-term illness. They can disrupt the gut barrier, trigger systemic inflammation, and in some cases lead to long-term digestive sensitivity. My conclusion wasn't to demonize broccoli sprouts. It was to respect their risk profile. The solution is control. Growing sprouts at home from tested seeds, cooking them lightly to reduce bacterial load, or obtaining sulforaphane through safer cruciferous vegetables. Detox should never come with an emergency room bill. Number 10. Shelf-stable fermented foods. Fermented foods close out almost every longevity list: yogurt, sauerkraut, kimchi, miso. The promise is always the same: feed the gut slow aging, restore balance. But here's the detail most labels don't emphasize. Many fermented foods sold on unrefrigerated shelves in the U.S. are pasteurized after fermentation. That heat treatment kills live bacteria to extend shelf life. What's left is flavor, salt, and branding, but little to no probiotic activity. In some shelf-stable sauerkraut and kimchi products, sodium levels exceed 300 to 500 milligrams per serving, while live cultures are effectively zero. Consumers believe they're rebuilding their microbiome, when in reality they're just consuming preserved vegetables. High sodium intake over time is associated with elevated blood pressure, vascular stress, and increased cardiovascular risk, especially when combined with a false sense of health that encourages frequent use. The microbiome doesn't respond to labels. It responds to living organisms. When those organisms are gone, the promised benefit disappears. My conclusion was subtle but important. Fermented is not a guarantee. Alive matters. The solution is simple but requires attention. Choose refrigerated fermented foods that explicitly state live and active cultures. Check expiration dates and avoid assuming shelf stability equals safety or efficacy. Longevity doesn't come from tradition alone. It comes from understanding what survives the process and what doesn't. After reviewing all 10 brands, I landed on one simple truth: the foods weren't the problem. The problem was what happened after the food became a product. Processing, sourcing, storage, and labels that turn complex safety questions into a clean little story. And the biggest risk wasn't one dramatic serving. It was repetition. A cup every morning, a bar every night, a healthy habit repeated 365 days a year until small exposures stop being small. I'm not telling you to fear green tea or dark chocolate. I'm telling you to stop giving your trust away for free. Longevity isn't built on marketing. It's built on transparency on test results, clean sourcing, and choices you can actually verify. The label can say natural. The data still gets the final word. Here's what I want you to do next. Pick just one item from your routine tea: chocolate, turmeric, olive oil, yogurt, and check it tonight. Look for added sugar grams. Look for sourcing. Look for third-party testing or a certificate of analysis. If you can't find any proof, that's information too. Then rotate, replace, and reduce the daily exposure where it matters most. If this video helped you see the hidden side of healthy, hit like so more people actually notice it. Share it with someone who's building a wellness routine right now. And if you want the follow-up, where I show what I'd buy instead, cleaner options, better labels, real testing, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Your health deserves more than a good story. It deserves the truth.